You got your cough medication rolling?
Nikki, you ready to hit that red button? We got Howard in the house. Howard Croston.
How you doing, man?
Welcome to the Mill House.
Awesome. Good to see you again.
Yeah, you too. I mean, and Nikki, you've never fished with Howard or seen him cast, but
I've seen him cast in Las Rocas when we went down there bone fishing.
I mean, dementia. It's alive and well.
That's worrying, Andy. We spent a week in Las Rocas chasing bonefish, man.
I just never saw him. I'd like to introduce you to, our listeners that, you are basically the main designer of Hardy rods and reels. We've been working together for about 14 years with the saltwater product.
Yeah.
You're a tournament caster. You used to compete against Ray Jeff. And two, you were the world champion trout fisherman, after pursuing that for 18 years. So there's a lot to talk about here today.
Yeah.
Getting into it, this is a reel that I bought. This is how many years ago? It was like 55 years ago.
Yeah, that reel is out of warranty.
You can see my name scratched on the back of it. But when I was like 11 years old, I tied flies all summer to buy a Hardy reel, and it was all based on, this sound,
Yeah.
And to tell you the truth, even though I work with Hardy, with the saltwater product, I feel like it's almost sacrilegious for a trout fisherman to be dry fly fishing without an English-made Hardy reel.
Oh.
I mean, it's really like the Rolex of trout reels.
It is.
In a way.
That is the classic fly reel right in your hands there. Lightweight series is, well, I wouldn't even like to think how many of those are out there now.
Well, if you take a look at some of the old photographs with Joe Brooks and Lefty Cray, they bonefished with this reel.
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
because of that sound, know. Excuse me. But this is the 150th anniversary of Hardy.
It is. Big year for the brand.
You've got a new reel coming out, which is the 150th edition, right?
That's it, the St. George. Yeah, beautiful piece of kit.
Right. And so tell me about the ring.
Yeah, so this is something that's really been synonymous with the Hardy brand over the years. This was just an agate lined ring, just a line guard, really, to protect your fly line. It's really something that sort of classic followers of the brand really sort of identify with.
Right.
This kind of design. And these reels are as serviceable now as they were when they were first ever manufactured. But this particular model's special for the 150th anniversary. It's only going to be available in limited numbers.
How many reels are you going to make?
We're just doing 150. Obviously, 150 years in existence, so 150 models.
So get your hands on one of those and hang on to it.
Yeah, try and grab hold of one of them while you can.
This is mine.
We can talk about that.
What? Let's go into the. We'll talk about rod and reel design, towards the back end of it. But what are you most proud of?
Wow.
You're a world champion. You were a big-time tournament caster, but you never won the world championships. What was it like competing against Steve Rajeff, who won 14 world championships?
Yeah, so my flirtation with sort of world-level casting championships was brief. I went to one world championships, and to be honest, casting against Steve, I pretty much realised then that, that was not the route for me. I came sort of from, in the UK, we had a lot of casting competitions, right? And I pretty much won all of them multiple times and didn't really have anybody that was challenging me to any great degree, especially in the accuracy casting. So then I went to Worlds sort of expecting, to some degree, a similar situation, or at least to be able to compete. And, I got chewed up pretty badly by Steve, to be honest, particularly in the distance event,
So I'm pretty ignorant in this field. So when you talk about the accuracy casting, are there hoops lined up, or what's the...
Yeah, but sort of in the home game where we used to compete, it was, you had like these targets that were probably about, 70 centimetres across, just a round disc. And you had like 2.5 minutes, hit the targets as many times as you can. Go around the course as many times as you can.
How many targets?
There'd be like five targets. So like the best score I ever had in one of those things was I threw for 2.5 minutes and never missed one. So I went around that course like time after time after time and had a massive score.
And how far away are these? Are there different
Oh,
ranges?
they're like staggered, short, long, short,
Gotcha.
long, short, long. But then when you get to Worlds, it's a totally different deal. It's like they take a lot of time to complete the course, and they never ever miss, pretty much. And I had a good run. I had like 95 points out of 100, but that wasn't enough to qualify me for the final. And then I spent like a week at an airfield just sitting around waiting for the thing to be over, and I sort of thought, wow, I've spent like a year practicing for this, and I've come all the way over here and I've missed one target and I'm out,
Wow.
And then I thought, yeah, I think maybe competitive fishing rather than casting might be a better route, because I like to catch fish. So
why was Steve so good? Besides being able to throw far, he could throw accurately, but his body build had to have been a great asset, being as big and strong as he is.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying, right, which is a good big un will always beat a good little un. So basically, I mean, it doesn't matter how good my technique is. My technique can be perfect. But if you've got that guy who's, what Steve, he's way over 6 foot, really big build, strong guy, he's got perfect technique. I'm not going to throw the thing as far as he is.
Right.
And I sort of realised that.
And what distances do you have to throw to be competitive in that distance event?
It's a long way. It's a long way.
How far is long?
They measure in meters. I can't remember what Steve's records are now, but, I wasn't reaching those distances.
So like 70 meters?
I honestly can't remember. It's the last time I competed, it was 90, I want to say 98, something like that.
Right.
And it's not fishing gear, right? It's
shooting heads,
it's a tungsten
running
shooting
lines.
head. It's thin running line that's like 2 pound diameter mono. I mean, it's a throwing sport.
So they throw it like 150 yards, right?
Yeah, they throw it a long way. I can't even. I'm too
No,
traumatized.
they can't throw it that far. That's 450
No, it's not
feet.
that.
No.
But I'm traumatized by some of the results that I saw in them events.
How many shots, how many opportunities do you get to throw that distance cast?
When I did it, bear in mind it's the late 90s, so it might have changed, but I'm sure you had like 7.5 minutes to get as many out there as you could. But you've got to recover a lot of line, and you've got to lay it all out. And, particularly for me, if I didn't get a good shot in the first 3, I was done. Because the gear's heavy. It's heavy, it's hard to use.
You get fatigued.
Oh, yeah, you can really start to feel it.
But you were telling me that some people had like a caddy, like a casting caddy, like golfers have a caddy, where they would, after you'd make the cast, they would help put the running line and spread it all out so it would never coil up. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the one I did in 98, some of those guys had guys to lay the line for them. I didn't. I just went over there with me dad and just jumped straight into the breach and, gave it a go.
Jumped into the fire.
Yeah.
Well, what can you tell our listeners how maybe to cast further or cast more accurately? Because I think that's a little bit more relevant to them with their actual application.
Yeah.
Than
100%.
listening to what these guys do, throwing 200 feet or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the first thing is when you watch like the average guy fishing, right? The first thing is they pretty much always get too quick, so they're always trying to cast fast, and they're always putting way too much effort in.
So the stroke is too fast.
Yeah, they just really try and throw it rather than cast it, right? So you see a lot of people putting all this effort in. Modern fly rods, an incredible transmitter of casting energy. We're blessed by some of the gear we've got these days. Makes it so much easier to generate line speed, and you don't need to put a lot of input into the thing. And you get these guys and they're just really overpowering it.
So they're throwing more with the arm and not allowing the rod to do the throwing.
Yeah, a lot of it, and then just overpowering the rod even. When they make that cast, and you'll see sometimes at the shows, we've been to a show recently, a lot of guys on the casting pond, they're hitting it, and then you see all these like shock waves running down the fly line.
Right.
And that's that rod tip bouncing and counterflexing just because they've given it too much.
One of the things I notice when I watch you cast, the upper loop is flat, or the upper line. When you make that cast, the upper line is absolutely flat. The loop is perfectly round, and the bottom line coming back to the rod tip is perfectly flat. Is that because of the efficiency of energy, and the rod's not bouncing to create that wave?
Yeah, that's a couple of things. That's just giving it just the right amount of power to make it work, but also really when you stop that rod, it's a sharp stop after some very, very straight tracking, really. So when you apply that power to the rod, you've got to apply it in a straight line path. You've got to make that rod tip travel in a straight line path, stop it efficiently, transfer that energy that you've put into the rod into the line without overpowering it, and then you'll form that really tight, neat loop that's aerodynamic. So it's going to travel. It's going to use that energy efficiently. It's not going to wave off in different directions. You're not going to lose any line
So no
speed.
semi-arc of the rod tip in the stroke itself.
No, I try and keep that tracking as nice and straight and pull it straight through as I can.
I was going to ask about that because a lot of people have that tendency or the issue of a tailing loop. Can you talk a little bit about, what causes that tailing loop?
Yeah, so a lot of tailing loops are just caused by creep. So basically all that is when you stop that rod into the back cast, you get a lot of guys who've got a tendency to creep the hand forward and then apply the power.
Before the line really gets unraveled behind you.
Yeah, even if it does straighten behind you, just when you creep into the forward cast, you don't get a good application of power. You cause that rod tip to kick a little bit and you'll throw that trailing loop because the line does exactly what the rod tip does. That's a given.
For the people that don't understand what creep is, once the rod stops in the back cast, before you wait for the weight of the fly line to move that rod tip forward, a lot of people will slide that rod tip to about 40% before they actually make that cast. Yeah. So if they're trying to throw 70, 80 feet with only a half a cast, they got to hit it too hard.
Yeah, they put that power in late.
Right. So that rod creep is talking about from the extension of the back cast. Once that stops, that rod comes forward with no resistance on the line for the forward cast. So that rod tip goes from all the way back to halfway. That's what they call creep.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. If you're trying to throw a real long distance, when you stop the rod, will you creep back to get a bigger stroke?
Yeah, 100%. So that's a little different. So we call that drift. So we drift into that back cast. And all that allows you to do then is apply that power over a longer arc. So if you're applying that power over a longer stroke, you're applying a little bit more power, but you're getting it in there smooth. And that's the main thing, that smooth application of power between two sort of pretty sharp stops. The stops are what transfers the energy to the line. That smooth application of power between the two stops is what really loads that rod and gives you that line speed when you do stop.
I've always told people, trout fishing, it's like throwing a dart right in front of you. It's a small little stroke. But once you start casting into a 20-mile-an-hour wind, you got to throw it 60 feet. It's the similar relationship to throwing a baseball all the way across the field. You got to reach back and throw it.
Yeah, 100%.
But I also noticed, too, watching you throw a long way, your false casting stays the same pretty much. But your very last false cast, when you want to throw it a long way, that's when you let line go out on that back cast. Is that the key to throwing far?
Yeah, for me it is. My particular style, I like to slip a little bit into the back cast. So really, it's sort of like a win or lose strategy, right? Because sometimes it goes wrong if you don't practice it a lot.
You allow too much line to go out.
Yeah, if you let too much feed in, you're gonna lose your loop shape and everything's gonna go wrong. Especially when you're using a weight forward line, right? Because of the taper. So if you get too far out past that taper, it's all gonna collapse on you. But that little bit of extra slip into the back cast, just for me, gives me that little bit of extra load on that final cast when I'm going to try and bury it, and it's good in a fishing situation when you've got to extend to cover fish quick.
So the fly fishing competition or the fly casting competition, that went before the whole trout tournament scene?
Yeah, I mean, I've fished since I was a kid, but, I think it was like 98 I did the Worlds. I'm pretty sure it was 98. And then I entered a trout fishing river tournament in like 99, I think it was. And I just thought I'm going to give it a go. I knew some guys who were doing it. I knew some guys in the England team, and I thought, well, I'm competitive.
And you crushed it.
The first one I won, yeah. I mean,
course.
The river was, we turned up and the river's in like this huge flood. I mean, there's trees coming down and everything, and there's like 60 people in the car park all competing. And they were all like, everyone was complaining and like it should be cancelled and everything. But the organiser said, no, it's going ahead, And I thought, well, I mean, I'm fishing in the river when it's like this anyway at home when it's coloured, so,
Right.
I'll just go and fish it. And, I mean, I caught 2 fish. It was hard, but it was enough to win it.
Right.
So.
Well, let's go back to the tailing loop real quick. just to follow up. So if you hit that rod really hard, when that rod is creeped forward, that's going to shock the rod, throwing a tailing loop. Will that happen too if you hit it too hard at the very beginning of your forward stroke? Because I've always told people, when you make a cast, make sure you build speed. You don't want to hit it hard right away. You build speed, and then about halfway through that arc, that's when you really accelerate it to a stop.
Yeah.
Am I correct in that
No, 100%.
assessment?
As long as you get that power down nice and smooth, that's the big thing, you know? Because what you get when people creep, they sort of creeping, then they hit it, and then it all goes wrong.
Yeah.
You know, but if you're starting from back here and you're driving that power through nice and smooth and accelerating all the way, when you turn it off, when you stop that rod, everything's smooth and it just transfers it straight into that fly line, and that's when you get the nice, good loop quality. Everything's traveling. That's when you get the long cast.
Give people an idea about, to be a little bit more effective in a saltwater situation, throwing into a 20-mile-an-hour wind. What is key? What is the key elements to that?
Yeah, so the similar principles, right? So the worst thing you can do in wind is trying to hit it into the wind, because again, all you're doing is you're just overpowering that rod. You lose your loop shape, you lose everything. It all goes down. One good thing that you can do, and it's tricky in some saltwater situations, especially where you don't want to spook those fish by a bad presentation. But if you can take that aiming point from, you know, if you're going to throw a long cast normally, you would aim quite high. You'd stop the rod tip quite high and let that line shoot and extend. When you've got to be accurate in wind, if you bring that aiming point down slightly,
right?
So you're shooting downhill a little bit more, so that when the power comes out that line, when that line finishes turning over, it's already at its target.
It's close to the surface of the water.
Yeah, it's coming down at the target, because once that power comes off, everything stops traveling, right? So when that line finishes unrolling, it stops to travel. What you want to do in wind really is aim that in there so that it arrives at the target just as it turns over. Now, the risk is, you know, you're piloting on top of the fish and it blows up.
Right.
But
the end of your cast is not going to be too high, so the wind's not going to blow it offline.
no, you want to press the power down more and aim more toward the target with the power if you can.
But you still recommend the upright forehand cast as opposed to the sidearm.
Yeah, you know, it's a little bit situation dependent. You're always more accurate like that. You know,
Right.
when you want to throw accuracy,
Over the top.
yeah, you're coming down and throwing at the target, line of sight.
One of the things I've noticed over the years, having done it for 40 years now, you have sensitive fish. A lot of people don't realize these fish will see the shadow of a false cast.
Yeah,
You know, so that low sidearm, now you can ambush it, because when you shoot it with a low sidearm, all of a sudden that 15-foot leader's over the top of the fish.
yeah,
And also, too, water loading. Sidearm casting with a water load. So there's not a lot of false casting going on. I see most people, once they get past 2 or 3 false casts, now all of a sudden the wind takes over and they lose control of it.
yeah.
So that water load, put the fly line in the water, one false cast back into the water, wait for your fish, wait for your shot, then go to your fish.
Yeah.
Tell me about how important the hauling hand is. You can push so hard with the casting hand in the rod. Can you equal or double your line speed with a good hauling hand?
Oh, the haul is everything. I mean, that's like quantum leap in fly casting, right? It's
The hauling hand.
you can only do so much with this, because this hand is giving that rod, you know, the right amount of power to work it, basically. When you bring this left hand in, you start to haul, that's when you're really doubling up on that line speed.
So you can double the line speed. Oh yeah, you match the speed of the rod.
Yeah, the haul is everything. You know, if you want to make that jump between being somebody you can cast and being an accomplished caster, you've got to master the haul. That, you know, the double haul is everything in fly casting, for everything really, for distance, accuracy, control, the whole thing.
How about trout fishing? But because trout fishing, you're not casting all that far. You need a little bit of a tick, but it's not like a saltwater cast where you rip that hauling hand way past your
It depends.
Your pocket.
It really depends. I mean, we fish a lot of lakes at times. I love to fish the river, but we fish a lot of lakes, you know. And we'll throw shooting heads. You know, you've got to throw those things on some of our lakes. You've got to throw them 50 yards.
Well, that's different than creek fishing.
Yeah,
yeah.
And you've really got to be able to throw it to do any good. You know.
Because the application here, you obviously have fished a lot of saltwater, world champion in the freshwater. What do you, and obviously you're the world champion, but what kind of appeal does the saltwater fish have for you?
I just love it. I'll be honest, if there was tarpon swimming off the northeast coast of England, I probably wouldn't trout fish that much.
Right.
I love it, but it's always that thing, right? It's what it's a treat for me to go in saltwater. I maybe get once or twice a year sometimes if I'm lucky. But I just love it because I love any kind of visual fishing. Right?
The hunt aspect.
Yeah, so when I'm trout fishing, if I can see the fish and I can stalk it and I can get it to eat a nymph or something or a dry fly, see it come up and eat, and it's the same thing in saltwater. They're just a lot bigger.
So when are you going to fish the saltwater tournaments?
Well, I think I'd need a fair bit more practice before that.
Oh, you'll be fine.
If on a fun day of fishing and you're nymphing, do you blind cast or do you hunt your fish?
It depends really on the scenario. If I'm on a clear stream and conditions are good, fish are up on the fin, I'll walk and I'll just
up on the fin. What does that mean?
just sitting up, just a bit like a tarpon
Like
when it's
laid
high
up.
in the water. Yeah,
So we call it laid up. You call it finning up?
Yeah, just sitting on the fin in the current.
Sitting on the fin.
Yeah.
But you got to say, sitting on the fin.
That's it. The right accent.
Nicky's good. Come on, Nicky. Rock that English accent.
No, I'm stealing your show.
No, but you know what? That's one of the things that I've kind of gravitated to, I think, through Nicky's eyes these last number of years. He kind of got me back into trout fishing because Nicky's a guide in the Aspen area in the summertime. And we go to the river, and we won't even cast until we find the fish.
Yeah.
Whether it be dry fly, feeding on dry flies, or whether it be, hanging out in the current.
Yeah. No, I mean it really depends on like I say, on the situation for me. So a lot of the times when it comes to tournament fishing, we're fishing blind because we can't see them.
You got to catch fish.
We've got to catch fish, and we're doing things which are based around being efficient rather than enjoying the fishing experience as much.
Right. Yeah, I understand that very well.
Yeah.
You were telling me the other day we were at the trade show in Somerset, Jersey, where I was looking at some flies that a shop was selling. And you were saying, don't ever buy a fly from a shop. They're all rubbish.
That was the worst accent I've ever heard.
I kind of hammered that one up. But, and you were telling me that you tie all your own flies, and you're saying most average store flies have terrible hooks. Why?
It depends. It depends. That was a bit of a broad-ranging statement on my part, but there are good flies out there and there are good hooks out there. And stuff has got way better over the last few years. It really has. I used to, from a competition perspective, I used to tie all of my own stuff. And to some degree, I still do. Because, when you're fishing at that kind of level and you've tried to rule everything else out, taken all the chance out of it as much as you can in anything to do with fishing, the hook is the bit that's connecting you to the fish.
Right.
So, when I tie flies for competition flies, I dump the packet out on the table. If there's anything that's got a bit of a dodgy eye or the hook doesn't look right, it just gets binned.
So you examine all the hooks before you even start tying?
Yeah, I go through them all because I don't want to put the work into making something that then might potentially let me down. But things have got a lot better. There are some good flies out there now.
What's the weakest link in the market that most people don't understand? Would it be the hook?
I don't really know. There's too many weak links out there now. I mean, the gear's getting better all the time. You can get good tippets. You don't have to look for it as hard as you used to. I used to mess around all the time with finding thin nylon that was, a good amount of stretch, but not too much, and would take a good knot and was abrasion resistant enough. But there's good stuff out there.
Right.
You can find it.
My father was telling me that you normally fish one fly.
I fish a lot of one fly techniques, but I will fish two as well.
So your second fly, is that tied off of the main line?
Yeah, it's on a dropper. It's never in line. You never tie off the bend of the hook.
Why is that?
It's two reasons. One's the regulations. We've got all these rules we've got to work to. The second is that it does impede the hooking efficiency of that hook it's tied off. You will catch fish on it, but particularly when the fish are pressured and the bite's really sort of tentative and it's not a full committal to eating the fly, tying off the bend reduces the number of good clean takes and good clean hook sets you get.
But also,
so what I do is the first fly that I tie on, I tie the second fly off of that same eye.
Yeah, you could do that. I mean, again, we can't do it. The only reason I wouldn't do that is because when that fly is hanging on a dropper, it's going to fish and swim way better in the current. You know, all that, really, when you're tying on that eye, all you're really doing is you're pinning that fly a little bit more. You will get some fish to eat it, but a lot of situations where fishing and it's really pressured. Those fish have been picked on a lot. You know,
so the action of the fly is impeded.
Yeah, you're really pinning it in 2 points instead of having it on 1 point and fishing a little bit more. Yeah.
And what about split shot?
I'm not a bait fisher. I don't need split shot.
You're a bear fisher.
Bait fisher.
I'm not bait fishing. There's the accent again. You see.
Yeah.
No, we can't use split shot. It's
in tournaments.
Oh, you can't.
No split shot. The rules are like really complicated. The book is like this big.
Wow.
And most of those rules are written to keep it fly fishing, right? So they don't want you using just monofilament on the reel. You've got to use a fly line. They don't want you using split shot. They don't want you using strike indicators. You can't use, a floating indicator. It's got to be
organic.
Yeah, it's got to be in line. It's got to be part of the leader. So we do use an indicator of sorts, but it's actually part of the leader.
You know? And how is that formed?
Typically, it's coloured monofilament, but there are ways around it. There are dodges you can do. You know, we use paint pens and coloured wax and coloured grease, depending on the situations. A lot of it's tinkering to get everything fishing right and efficient and within the rules. You know.
How do you get a very small, lightweight fly deeper in the water column when there's a lot of current, and you don't have weight on your leader? Yeah,
so there's a few ways. So the flies, if you're going to fish in hard, fast water, you want to get the fly down deep. The first thing is the fly design. The fly's got to be tied the right way. So that means typically you're not using flies that have got a lot of dubbing or a lot of hackle or anything like that. Pretty slim. Quite often with a varnished body, something like a perdigan, which is a Spanish fly. It basically means pellet. So it looks like a little slug. It looks like a little missile. Almost.
You're using pellet flies, huh? Yeah.
Not trout.
Come on.
Not trout pellet flies. Close.
We know your trick now.
Just a handful of loose feed gets them going. Yeah. So like a little pellet, like a little bullet. And there's other tricks. So let's say you've got a 3mm bead and you've got to get it in fast water, which normally would take a 4mm bead to get down to the fish. So the first thing you do, right fly. Second thing you do is make sure that tippet is thin enough so that it doesn't impede the drop of the fly. Third thing you do is rather than flipping it in the water, you drive it in the water. So like a little missile. You know, you'll ping.
So it'll sink faster?
Yeah.
So you power that stroke so the leader flips over real hard and it drives that fly down.
I'm just flipping it in with the wrist and it's shooting down. It's probably getting a foot of travel before the weight kicks in. So I'm driving that fly into the water. Then getting the control. And then the next thing, the last piece of the puzzle that most people miss is then how you lead that fly. Because most guys, especially the guys who Euronymph, which is a big thing now in the US, they'll lead that, they'll stay behind that fly all the time and they'll lead it down current.
Right.
Well, that leader is sitting at, quite a shallow angle to the fly. So you've got all that resistance in the current. If you get above it and control over the top of it, you get a much more straight line path to the fly. And
so you high stick that fish.
You stay above it. You stay more above it if you can, and that'll let that fly get down.
And that's why you use real long rods so you can reach out.
Better control, better... control of the drift, everything. So we tend to fish much longer rods.
But you're fishing a hole or a riffle 10, 15 feet away from you? You're not fishing 30 feet across the bank, are you?
It depends. Sometimes we'll throw longer. It really depends how the sort of water sets up in front of you and how tolerant those fish are. Because sometimes they're not tolerant at all and you've got to stay way back. And we use knee pads and all sorts of things. We crawl up in the river to them and to reduce that distance. It really is scenario dependent. How far away is the right distance, right?
How many flies do you have in your fly box?
It's a lot, but it's not many patterns. So my nymph box, Andy saw it the other day, it's maybe got 1,100 flies in it. There's probably 10 fly patterns in there.
Just different sizes and different sizes of beads, right?
Yeah, different size, different weight.
So the bead size determines how fast you want the fly to sink?
Yeah, pretty much.
And you use tungsten hooks.
They're
right?
all tungsten beads. Yeah, a lot of jig hooks. Jig hooks are really popular now. You know, it's you don't need them. Everyone thinks they fish upside down. They don't. They roll in that current quite a lot. You still get snagged on them, but they hook up really well. You know, they do hook fish well and they hold fish well. So jig hooks have become pretty much commonplace.
But I also see your beads have different colors, pink and white and black. How do you assess what bead to fish, what color of bead to fish?
You know, I still keep trying to catch that talking trout and then can find out. But it's just one of those things. You will find there's patterns sometimes. You know, we'll go somewhere. If that water's like carrying a lot of snow melt and it's like white, it's got a lot of that particulate in it, like you get in the Alps when you've got the snow melt coming in. Orange works great. Hot orange, brilliant colour, you catch a lot of fish in it. Clear water, silver, tends to work really well. When the water's got a little bit of like tannin stain or tea stain in it, a little bit brown, copper, great colour. But then you also see that sometimes the pressure on the fish dictates what they'll eat. So if you've got a stretch of river and a lot of guys are all fishing the same sort of coloured stuff, you then go and fish something a little bit different,
That might trigger.
you'll start getting takes to it. You know, it's one of those things. There's often patterns in there, but sometimes you've got to work them out. You can't just work from a rule book, unfortunately.
Right.
You know.
So I'm really interested in this. So walk me through the World Championships. So a river gets decided
Yeah.
by a board or...
Yeah, so basically what happens is there's a process countries apply, right? And they'll say, we want to hold the World Championships. Here are the venues that we want to use. And it's nearly always river heavy, right? Sometimes it's not, you know, it's sometimes just rivers and lakes mixed together in equal quantities, but it's pretty much heavily biased to rivers. And we'll fish, now the new format is we'll fish 5 days. And we'll fish one session per day of between 3 to 4 hours. And it'll be across 5 different venues. So a team is 5 men. We all get split into 5 groups. And we rotate through those venues as a group of international anglers. So there'll be one from every country. All go to this venue, then we move to the next venue.
When you say venue, is that a section of the river?
Yeah, so it'll be like, let's say, an 8 or a 10 mile stretch of river maybe. And we all get a beat. We all get one section. So there'll be 2 sticks in the ground, and that is your water for 3 hours.
And that's normally 300 yards?
Well, there's rules in the, you know, you're supposed to get 125 metres. I've had 50 metres, and I've had a kilometre.
Wow.
You know, it can vary dependent on the host country, right? So, and you can get really good water, and you can get terrible water.
Terrible water, I mean you could get a beat behind a bunch of really good fishermen?
No, just meaning there's not many fish
There's not
in
many
it.
fish in it.
Not many fish in it. And you've got to be able... Sometimes these things come down to one fish. Literally one fish or millimetres of one fish.
And so how is it judged? You catch a fish and you take the total length of the fish and you add them up?
Yeah, there's a minimum size they set. You know, it can be anything. 20 centimetres, 25 centimetres. Normally somewhere 20 to 30. Fish gets measured, gets released. That fish dies... you're losing your points. You know, fish cur's like right high on the agenda. So, you know, that fish has got to go back safe.
And you have an observer that measures these fish?
He stands there on the bank. He's making sure you're following the rules, that you're taking care of the fish, that the fish are measured accurately, the whole shooting match. You know, so you've got a judge on the bank behind you.
Wow.
How important is winning the World Championships aside from the personal pride?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was just always something I wanted to do. You know,
Kind of like the tarpon tournaments and bonefish tournaments.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of money in it.
No, I mean, it cost me a lot of money to compete, really, you know, per se. It's not, especially when you factor in all the time I spend practicing and traveling and all the time away from home. And
Is it more important in Europe than it is in the United States? Because generally speaking, we never speak about World Championship fly fishing. And unless you're in the saltwater world, nobody understands what the Gold Cup means.
Yeah.
But in Europe, is the freshwater World Championships a big deal?
Yeah, I would say it's a bigger thing than in the US. I mean, you know, typically it can be anything up to 30, 32 countries is about the most that we get.
Wow.
And some countries even put 2 teams in. You know, occasionally there used to be a men and a ladies team from some of the countries. And then we have a European Championships as well, which is, again, a smaller event. It's probably about half the teams, sort of like 15-ish, around about there. But it's become, especially in the US, I mean, there's more... The US teams are doing a lot better now. They used to come right down in the bottom 3 all the time, but in recent years...
They're vying at the top.
Well, they've really got their act together now, and they're always pushing for medals, and they've got a really strong team.
Yeah.
They've got way better.
So my father told me that you fish across a river and you might fish back across the same section that you just went through.
Occasionally. It just depends. Not always. If it's grayling fishing, yeah, because grayling are really tolerant. I mean, not always, but a lot of the time grayling will come straight back to where they were.
So you won't spook them. They'll come back to the same area.
No, sometimes they'll follow you around. They'll just swim around because you're kicking stuff up off the bottom when they're eating it. I mean, we've got rules in place so that you can't purposely disturb the riverbed or anything like that.
Chum your old
you can't
downwater.
That's not fishing.
Yeah.
But, you can, if you fish across a piece of river, sometimes when you've got grayling, they're just lying doggo, they're switched off. They're just comatose, they're just not interested. But if you move them, then they come back switched on.
But that's not the case with trout.
Trout usually will spook.
Right.
So usually you'll not cover the same ground. I mean, one of my adages in competition fishing was always catch one, spook two. So if I catch a trout from a piece of water and I fight it, then I'm usually thinking there was probably 2, maybe 3 sitting there. So in the process of hooking and landing, I'll move those fish, and quite typically within 5 to 10 minutes they're gonna wander back. So I'll often redo the same good water again, because good water's good water.
Right.
So they're going to go back in there again.
What's interesting, when we fish Colorado, a lot of times we don't even really move very far. Some days we'll go way up the canyon, but if it's good, we might just stay in a section that's got a 100-yard section.
Well, one hole might have 20 fish.
Yeah. But what drives me crazy is when you're down there and all of a sudden you look up and somebody just walks in on top of you 50 yards away. Is there a problem with that? Where you fish, people's getting fights and arguments, but hey, that don't come so close. Like in the saltwater world.
No, we're lucky. In the UK, we're lucky because we got a lot of fishermen, but a lot of fishermen who just fish in lakes and fish for stock rainbow trout. Don't really go near the river, and we've got great river fishing, and it's not pressured.
Have you ever fished the test?
I've fished the test many, many times, and it's...
Tell me about this. This one of the most renowned fishing spots on the planet.
It is, you've
Isaac Walton fished there. A lot of the famous.
Yeah,
early
I mean,
guys.
it's the history of fly fishing, right? A lot of it, and it's an incredible place to fish. It really is. But you've just got to approach it. The way I approach it is for what it is. Right, so it's a beautiful place. You're going to catch some fish because there's stacks of fish in it, But it is manicured. It's a very manicured environment. You've got closely mown grass, all the weeds kept under control. You've got a big head of fish which are not that selective. If the truth be known, they're not hard to catch.
Right.
So you've got to show some restraint and
you don't go in there and catch all their pets.
But it's dry. It's dry fly only.
Some of it, yeah. Some of it up to a certain point of the year, you can only dry fly fish, and then, after July, typically you can throw a nymph, and you're always gonna catch something.
Right. What did you do when you were at the test?
I caught the biggest brown trout in there. Of course I did.
No, but didn't you guys go in there with like nymph rigs and stuff?
That was like a chartreuse toad. That's what I heard. Anyway, I mean,
fishing the swing.
I heard you banned. That's what I heard.
Didn't you go in there with?
I'm not
with Bob.
I'm not talking about anything. I'm asking Howard about the good old days on the test. One of the things that you made mention last week that I found fascinating is that when you have a spot where there's a bunch of trout that are feeding, and I asked you how hard it is to see a strike with the leader without an indicator, and you were saying a lot of times you'll just strike knowing that the fly is in their face.
Yeah, so is that a secret?
We're
getting into all the secrets now.
Are we getting into some dark stuff?
It's dark, but it's not a big secret.
Tell me about that.
So everybody thinks, so when fish get pressured, when trout get pressured, everybody thinks they stop eating, that they're just not intercepting things that are coming down the current. That's not, strictly speaking, true. What does happen is when they intercept something, rather than that sort of reaction being an aggressive reaction and quite a clear indication that they've eaten it, it just becomes a lot more tentative. They'll take it in and they'll blow it out straight away. And even when you're fishing well and you've got good control and everything's going well, your contact to the fly is never what you think it is. And you miss a lot of strikes. Those fish are mouthing those things a lot of the time, and you don't even know it's happening. So a lot of good competitors, some of the top guys, what they'll do is, when that fly gets into somewhere where you're expecting a fish, they'll just set the hook and throw it back in again. Because we're making relatively short drifts a lot of the time. And if you do that a lot through good water, you're going to intercept and convert a good number of those takes. Just as that fish hits it, you've set and it's on.
Any snagging of with that scenario?
No,
snag very many?
It's so rare to actually foul hook a fish.
Because the flies are so small.
It's surprising, really, but you just don't seem to foul hook fish. And if
that
you did anyway, they don't count.
Oh, they don't count.
No, so you wouldn't even want to do it anyway.
Right.
So.
We were talking about dropping pebbles off of a bridge. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so I when I'm not fishing, I fool around a lot with fish, if I can. You know, when we had COVID and I couldn't fish, I've got a river just like right down the hill from the house. So every day my 1 hour allowed walk, which is what you're allowed to do, you know, I just went out and messed around. So I was flicking little bits of gravel off a bridge at fish I can see. These are wild fish just sitting in the current. And typically what happens is you flick a bit of gravel at them and they'll come over straight away and they'll eat it. You know, they'll just suck it in and then you'll see them blow it out. Give it a few seconds, flick them another bit and they'll still react to it, but they won't eat it. You know? You throw something else in the water, maybe a different colour or something that sinks different, they'll often eat it again, straight away. So they're just sort of associating, you know, that they eat it, oh, it's not food, they blow it.
It's a reaction bite.
Yeah. So you can work some things out with that.
So you think on the traditional nymph rig where people have an indicator and 2 flies and a couple split shot, they miss a lot of the bites and the indicator never shows.
Oh, 100%. There's so much interference going on there. You know, you've got
two split shot, two
flies,
two
split shot, there's all this stuff going on. The best presentation really of a nymph is you want to be as connected, you want to be as unconnected to it as possible, if that makes sense. You want contact, but you don't want all this stuff between you and the fly.
The interference.
Yeah, you don't want interference. You just want, you know, that fly is going to behave better. Everything that happens to it will be transmitted better, you know. And for sure, there's times when you need some kind of suspension rig, certain kinds of water or certain scenarios.
And that means a strike indicator as far as the suspension rig.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're throwing 50 feet to a far bank, it's hard to get a perfect drift unless you have an indicator that anchors that fly line or that leader, so you can mend and you still get a perfect drift under that indicator.
Yeah.
Am I correct or am I wrong?
You're correct, but a good friend of mine once said that's what waders are for. Right?
What happens if you have really big current and you can't wade across there or get to it, but you still have passive water on the far side, and with a good long cast, a high rod, and you can mend like hell, and you have that indicator kind of holding, you know, the fly in position.
Yeah. So we used to swim. I mean, they banned it now. We can't swim anymore. But in those scenarios, we used to just swim across and zero down the distance and then fish a tight line method to them, rather than, because the thing is with an indicator in a competition, when you're throwing that range and you're throwing across a lot of complex water, it's fine sticking the fish, but you've got to bring it back. You've got to fight it back across fast, deep water or whatever. You've got it in play for a long time. There's a better chance of it coming off. So we used to always try and still do, try and zero the range down so that when you do get a take, it registers clean, you set the hook clean, and you can hopefully play it pretty clean.
So even fun fishing, you never use an indicator?
Oh, yeah, I'll use them sometimes.
Oh, you will?
Yeah, I'll use them
Give
sometimes.
me that scenario, just like I was explaining just now.
Yeah, so in the winter, if I'm grayling fishing, it's cold. You know, I don't want to wade deep and fall in, because I do sometimes. You know, I'll throw some form of indicator and use it to drift down a pool.
Right.
What about streamer fishing?
Yeah, do quite a lot of streamer fishing. I mean, I usually fish them on a Euro rig, so on a level leader rather than throwing a sinking line. I'll fish them a little bit like a nymph and just twitch them out at the end of the swing or swing them out.
But I asked you last week if you had one fly to fish, Is this another secret you don't want to?
No,
If you had
it's
one
not.
fly to fish, what fly would that be? And what'd you tell me?
I told you a black streamer or like a woolly bugger because pretty much everything eats it, right? It's one of those flies that just works. You know, it doesn't matter. I mean, even grayling eat them, which people don't think grayling eat streamers. They do. Even European grayling. I mean, Arctic grayling are a little different. They're a lot more aggressive and they'll eat pretty much anything. European grayling, got a little smaller mouth, don't react in the same way to big flies, but they'll still eat a streamer sometimes. So you can catch pretty much anything on it. You know, it's not my favourite flight to fish.
But you also said too, which was interesting. You cast that streamer upstream and drift it straight back towards you and into the fish's face.
Yeah, I fish a lot of streamers upstream and pull them back down across. And the reason is, there's two reasons really. One is when you fish it downstream and across, the hooking angle's pretty poor. I mean, you can manufacture a good hooking angle by mending and doing all sorts of things. But pretty much, essentially, the fly's swimming across the current with some control, tight line contact. Fish is coming up from behind it, taking it. It's really got to take it and turn away to get the nice hook up in the corner of the mouth. Now, sometimes when they're really active, that works great. You're going to get them like that. But if they're not that aggressive and they're not feeding aggressively, if you bring that fly down in the current to them, it triggers the sort of fight or flight response. So if it's sitting there and that little thing's swimming at it, even if it doesn't want to eat it, it's going to get territorial and it's going to probably attack it, and it's going to attack it with its mouth. So you're getting that, you get two plays really. Mm-hmm. So you get a much better hooking angle, but you're also getting the fish that potentially going to eat it because they think it's coming down dead in the current towards them. But you're also going to get the fish that think that thing's invading my space, I'm going to kill it, So I fish a lot of my streamers upstream.
And you net your fish in midair.
Sometimes. It just depends how big they are, so.
But even a smaller fish, I can't imagine yanking it out of the river without breaking your 7X. Because I was told that you go with your rod in one hand and a net in the other, you hook one and you flip them right into your net.
Yeah, when it's smaller fish, because all it is really, it's an extension of the fish jumping when you stick the hook in it. So when you're fishing away upstream, if you've got it on a relatively short line in the pocket water or something like that, and you get that take, you set the hook, those fish often jump out the water straight away. Well, all you do then is just keep them coming because you've got the tension to them. They come off barbless hooks because there's no tension, right? So if it hits the water and gets traction, it can throw the hook a lot of the times. So we just keep them coming. Great big net. Before it knows what's happened, it's in the net and it's swimming off back in the current, none the wiser,
And you're using 10-foot rods, or what's kind of like your go-to rod?
Between 10 and 11.
11?
Yeah, 10 and 11 feet.
Just so you can keep that line off the water and get a good drift. Yeah, for the most part.
Good control at range.
Right.
But I mean, dry fly fishing, use 9-foot rods.
What makes let's get into the rod design a little bit. When did you first get into rod design, and what gave you the insight to be able to be hired by a company to design rods?
I pretty much when I started at Hardy's, which is nearly 20 years ago now, it seems like yesterday, but I was doing the tournament casting. I was competition fishing, and I got a start in product development. It was like product development assistant or something. I can't remember what I was.
So you had a mentor that was designing rods, and you were working with
them. There was a lot of good people at Hardy, and there still is, who were, we had materials guys, we had engineers, we had all sorts of things, and we had some really good fishermen as well. But sort of when I sort of came in, I was probably doing more trout fishing than anybody else. We had some incredible salmon anglers in the company, and to be fair, very good trout anglers and casters as well. But I sort of slipped into that product development role, and then some guys left and moved around, and I sort of kept moving up the kind of product development chain, and then ended up being sort of responsible for all of the action development on all of the fly rods and the input from a fishing perspective, a lot of it. Mm-hmm.
What in your eyes makes a good fly rod?
It's got to be. There's too many fly rods out there right now that are, and actually there's less now than there was, but that are just casting weapons.
Right.
It's great that it can carry, 60 feet of line out of the tip ring, and you can throw 110 feet with it. You got to fish with the thing, and a good fly rod should be a balance of that capability to put the fly where you need it to be if you're a good caster and, feel good and cast well. But it's got to be a good fishing tool for me, and a lot of rods aren't.
I think we had this conversation when I was hired 14 years ago to help bring the Hardy saltwater stuff up to speed.
Yeah.
And I've always told people, look, there are a lot of great casting rods out there. Almost every rod company throws 100 feet if you want, but what rod throws 30?
Yeah.
Because in the salt, a lot of your good shots later in the day without good light are very close. And what rod's going to turn over a 15-foot leader at 20, 30, 40 feet?
Yeah, 100%.
And then it becomes a great fishing rod.
Yeah. And that's something I got wrong. I'll be honest. The very, very first saltwater rods I worked on, I didn't get it right. Because,
but were you thinking, like I just made mention, or what were you thinking in the first years of saltwater design?
Well, I'd done limited saltwater fishing 20 years ago. I'd been like once, and I thought, a lot of it's more about range, it's more about being able
Distance.
to cast in strong wind, all that kind of stuff. So I was putting those attributes over the ability to load at short range and turn over just a leader and a bit of fly line. And that first time we fished together, that's when I sort of thought, right, get it now. Some of these casts are not, we fished that together that day, and you caught like 3 fish in the last hour of the day or whatever, and there were 2 of them within like 20 feet of the boat. So I didn't really appreciate that.
Until you saw it.
Yeah.
How did, I think we were the first company that came up with the Centrix Resin, which basically allowed us to build a rod that's 60% stronger and 30% lighter than any of the other rods. But a lot of companies had the Centrix Resin, the 3M resin. When did you first see that resin, and when did you first see how great that resin was as far as a product to glue rods together?
Yeah, so we did a lot of development work it was like 2010, 2011. Might have even been as early as 2009 from memory. My memory's getting bad, I'm getting old. But we got access to that resin, as did a lot of other companies. We did a lot of playing around with it. We had some external sort of resource that came in and gave us a bit of a leg up in terms of some of its applications. And we just really, what we came up with was a really good recipe.
Right, that's what I tell everybody. It's
description.
like everybody bakes a cake
Yeah,
with the same products,
yeah.
but some people bake that cake better.
Yeah, we just squeezed more out of it.
And how do you do that without letting any secrets out?
I'd have to kill you, Andy. I just can't tell you,
But tell me about the breaking. When you were testing rods and you built these rods with the Centrix Resin, and the difference with the rods with the resin.
Yeah, so the very first ones we built some saltwater rods, and we had a static deflection rig that just pulls weight pulls it, and it gives you a readout what it breaks at.
So you bend the tip down towards the handle of the rod, and all of a sudden it's going to break at some point.
Yeah, we did
measures.
two main static deflection tests. One was a deadlift, so like if you imagine from a fishing scenario, if you're deadlifting at the side of the boat, that's the first test. It pulls it straight up. The second one, which we always used to just call the rod killer, is where you're pulling that tip ring in towards the actual butt of the rod, so you're hooping it, so you're getting the real sort of
right
curvature in the blank.
I think that's what I saw in the video.
Yeah, we did a lot of that stuff. And the first rods that it was actually the second series of rods that we developed with it, or second set of prototypes that we developed with it. It was just like, they didn't break. Some of them didn't break, and the ones that did had really high breakage results. So much so that we actually got an external company to come in and check the load sensor.
Test your testing.
Yeah, because we didn't think it was reading right.
That's what I was telling Nicky
Wow.
when he first started breaking these rods with the Centrix Resin. It's like, this can't be real.
Yeah, we thought we had some kind of issue with the gauge, and they came and said, "Oh no, it's all good." So that's when we sort of realised, thought, right, well, we're getting more out of this, And then we built the prototypes, and we came down here with them. We came down here twice, down into the Keys, I think, and just did some insane stuff with.
And we were testing with the shark fishing with these rods.
Yeah, we did all those black tips.
You're right.
But
That's a great video.
Yeah, that was a bunch of fun.
I've been trying to break this rod for 14 years. I can't break it.
You haven't broken one.
I have tried. I can, unless anybody can break any rod if you take that rod and put it behind you.
Fish it in correctly. Yeah.
But Even fishing a little bit incorrectly outside of putting my hand up here with kind of a higher rod, I haven't been able to break one.
Yeah, nothing's indestructible.
Nothing,
but
for sure.
they've been significantly stronger.
Is that resin here to stay in rod design?
Yeah, we're looking at new things. We're looking at some new stuff now. We're always looking.
Right.
You can't stop. So we've got some new materials guys on board now who are really looking at substituting out some of the materials that we used to use for something new to give us another incremental step.
How many rod manufacturers are using this Centrix resin, and are any baking it the same way you guys are?
That's the trick. I really couldn't tell you what their process is, But I'm sure there's guys still using something similar because those resins or those types of resins have become
common,
more available. They're not all the same. It's like anything, But we're still doing our thing. We're very comfortable with in terms of results.
Right.
But we're always looking. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? Because you've got to. Things are going to keep improving.
Right. Well, it's interesting in that 14 years ago, our first prototype rod and reel won the Gold Cup.
Yeah.
And last year, the top 7 teams, were fishing hardy. I hate to make this sound like an infomercial, but the saltwater product is as great as the freshwater product now. So the spectrum has been filled.
Yeah, we didn't have that. We didn't have any presence really in saltwater, and
Yeah. What would you like to add to this conversation? We've covered a lot, with the casting, being in the World Championship freshwater fisherman that you are, and rod designer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, it's just been an awesome ride. It really has. It's, for me, when I learn how to fish, my dad and my uncle, they were the guys who got me fishing. My dad wasn't a fly angler. He was a course fisherman, a competition course angler.
And what does that mean, course, for the people who don't know?
Like whitefish, like bream and carp and all that kind of stuff. Not a game fish,
right?
But he got me into fly fishing because we had a holiday home in a nice part of the UK near a trout river because I had some health issues when I was younger. So they took me up there because it was cleaner and it was fresh and all that kind of stuff. And him and my uncle got me into fly fishing, and then it's just weird the sort of route you take, because I started off working in a fly shop and then ended up product development for probably the most famous fishing tackle brand in the world, really.
Celebrating 150 years this year.
Yeah, it's just been
the oldest.
It is a little bit mind-boggling.
Yeah. Well, my whole life growing up in Aspen was basically a skier, but my roots were as much fly fishing as they were skiing. And now, in these later years, my whole life has been consumed over the last 40 years of spending time traveling around the world, fishing these great locations with great people and catching these awesome fish. And fish, we all can all agree, they have great homes.
Yeah,
it's a lifestyle as much as it is a sport and a hobby.
I'd say, I've never fished in an ugly place. It's pretty much, if there's fish there, it's going to be special.
But it's crazy to imagine that we can actually target billfish with fly rods and go catch all the billfish out there. The marlin, the striped marlin, the white marlin, the swordfish, the spearfish.
Yeah.
So the spectrum of fly fishing is unlimited.
Oh, it's huge, from anything from, little things like that. And to be honest, that's one thing about competition fishing, right? So I get, and some people can't understand this, but when you're in like session 5 in a Worlds and you're fishing for, one fish, and that one fish is potentially gonna, as luckily happened to me, was enough to make me world champion, was one fish. If that fish, where else can you get the sheer adrenaline rush of landing a 20 centimetre trout? It's tiny, 20 centimetre trout. But if that's all you need
for a world championship title,
that little 20 centimetre fish.
That's your best catch of your life, probably.
Pure adrenaline. I can remember every one of the fish from the Worlds in 19 that got me over the line. There was actually 3 of them. And if any one of those 3 fish had not caught or lost, I would have been second.
Wow.
And here too, like in the black and blue tournament in Cabo, I think the payout on that tournament is like $4 million now. $3 to $4 million. It's crazy to see, even on a fun day of fishing, though, I mean, obviously that's extreme differences because there's so much on the line.
Yeah.
The World Championships, $4 million. But when you're fishing, and I remember these kids when they were little at the dock at the Chica Lodge catching these little, snapper, it does something to your heart. It does something to your being.
Yeah,
Fishing is cool.
It is. It's been awesome. Been an incredible ride. Even my wife to be fishes. She loves it. I'm getting married in July, so that might be the end of the competitions. I don't know. I might have to sell all my gear.
It's going to be the end of something for sure.
That's it.
It's a marriage.
Hi dear.
Well, Howard, it's great having you here at the house. It's been great working with you over the last 14 years and fishing too.
It's been awesome. Thanks, Andy. Man.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you
Really
so much.
appreciate it. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks so much, Howard.
Cheers, Nicky.
That was fun.
Yeah.
What I saw is West Side Story. What I saw is just a